So today, got a couple of reminders about things. And then you may notice that there are some additional new objects out there that we'll talk about as well. All right? So the main thing is I just want to remind you how one-point perspective works. There we are. All right? Remember that we first need that horizon line that represents the literal horizon and the eye level of the viewer. We need that one vanishing point. And when we draw something in one-point perspective, we're going to always start off with an unforeshortened plane that is the side of that object closest to us, the viewer, and then give us ourselves those lines that head toward the vanishing point. I realize now that's not perfectly parallel to the top and bottom and sides of the page, but it'll do for our purposes right now. Cap that plane off with the vertical. Cap that plane off with the horizontal line. And then I would go in and erase these lines because I don't need them anymore. Again, remembering that things that are above this horizon line are above our eye level, and the higher they go, the closer they are to the viewer. Below this line, objects are below my eye level, and as they move lower, they are getting closer to me, the viewer. Anything that crosses that line is at my eye level. Also, things become bigger as they become closer. They are smaller as they get further away. And things become more foreshortened. Planes become more foreshortened as they get closer to that vanishing point or as they get closer to the horizon. Right? Simple enough. I didn't see anybody who was struggling too much with that on Tuesday. Okay, that page is a little messy, so I'm going to go to a different one. All right, so that one's messy too, but it's just going to have to do. So now, out there, we have some new objects. We have some spheres, right? In addition to those cubes that are out there. So, introduce you to some new terms. When we have what you might refer to as a circular plane, we call that an ellipse. An ellipse, like I said, is a circular plane. When it's unforeshortened, it's a geometric circle. Right? But whereas when we take a rectangular plane, right, and foreshorten it, we start to see sides pinch in, we start to see it become smaller, right, or like so. When a circular plane becomes foreshortened, it doesn't have any of those nice straight lines on it to be affected by foreshortening. What happens is that as that circle, you see that it becomes an oval. Skinnier oval, the more and more becomes foreshortened. So you have your circle. And then as it foreshortens and turns all the more closer to being on edge with the viewer, we see that circle sort of squish into an oval and then become a thinner and thinner circle the closer it is to being on edge. Eventually, right, it would just be a line because it would be perfectly on edge with our eyesight. And then the same thing happens only on a horizontal axis if we foreshorten it this direction. that circle becomes an oval and becomes more of a pinched up and squished oval until eventually it would just be a straight line. So, right, we kind of have that thing happening as you foreshorten it this way, right? But we would refer to any of those circular planes as ellipses. If that would be plural. All right? So an ellipse, you think about at the gym, there's the elliptical machine, and it's because you're on that thing and your feet are running in a circle. That's why it's referred to as that. Right? Now, let me go back real quick. Now, what I am going to ask of you when you draw these is to draw these circular planes. And in the case of a sphere, all you need is a circle. No matter how you look at a sphere, from above or below, from the side, right? It doesn't change. It's always a circle. Now, we'll talk about some ways in the upcoming weeks to play around with the quality of line around that circle in order to make it feel more like something that's actually round. But for right now, all you need is a circle. But we're not going to sit here and put down a circle and trace it. I want you to do this with your own hand. However, what often will end up happening is you'll have an entire drawing with lots of objects that have been drawn with a ruler that all look really nice and tight. Because you had a ruler down to guide your pencil, you knew where your line was coming from, you knew where it was going, right? And then suddenly it's time to draw a sphere, and this happens. Right? Which is what I refer to as the fur ball, right? Because everybody gets worried about the circle and wants to be super careful and take the, and do all these kinds of little things. And then it suddenly doesn't look like it belongs with the rest of those objects on the page. This is something we refer to as unity within a composition. Meaning that everything in that composition should look like it belongs together. When something doesn't look like it belongs together, it throws off that unity. And on top of that, these things are all giving me a really nice illusion of three-dimensional space. Suddenly there's something like that on the page, and the illusion is gone. I'm reminded that what I'm looking at is a drawing. Right? So we're going to try to avoid this kind of thing. What I'm going to want you to do, and I'm going to talk to you about how to do it, and don't worry if you struggle with it. It's something that most people will at first.
Can you explain what is unity again?
Huh?
Can you explain what is unity again?
Unity? That's when it feels like everything in the drawing is consistent. I sometimes will refer to it as speaking the same language. Like if that box there is speaking German, this fur ball is speaking, I don't know, Swahili, right? Like they're two very different languages from one another. So, what I'm going to want you to do is, as much as possible, try to execute a circle in one line. I'll go over some techniques with you, and it's not going to be perfect the first couple times that you do it. Probably not for several times will it be perfect. But we'll talk about how you can correct things where they don't look quite correct. Now, the first thing I'll point out is you may notice that I don't necessarily hold my pencil the way that you may be accustomed to. Right? You're accustomed to holding a pencil like so, and I do too when I'm writing, right? Because this makes sense, because it's this kind of movement that you need, and that's about all that you need, right? For me, when I draw, however, I have a tendency to hold my pencil like so. Now, I'm not going to force you to do it. I will suggest that it's something to practice and it can improve your abilities. The way of thinking about it is, if you think about pointing finger, right, when you would point out at something, and replace that pencil with that. Replace that finger with your pencil, right? So that now this pencil kind of becomes like my pointing finger was, right? What this allows me to do, that this doesn't allow, right? If I've got this going on, I've kind of limited it to this kind of motion. When I'm holding my pencil like this, I have a lot more sort of freedom of how I can move. It's in many ways like holding a knife, right? If I'm carving something, I'm not going to hold the knife like this and try to figure out how to carve. I'm going to carve at it like that. And so it becomes kind of like that for me. I can move my hands. I'm not limited in the direction I can go with things. I can use my wrist to help me make quick movements if I need to. I can even shift my body and make marks in that way, right? So if I'm holding a pencil like this, right, and I want to draw a circle in one line, right, I start my circle off and now like my elbow is up in the air, and if I want to keep this circle going, I've either got to figure out how to dislocate my shoulder and stick my arm up in the air, or I've got to come back around like so and keep this line going. Which is all good and fine. But when I'm holding my pencil like this, I can use my wrist to be the thing that helps me to make that circle in one stroke. Right? And that's what I want you to do. I want you to be working on getting a circle done in one mark. From over there, that looked good. Now that I'm in front of it, let's put yourself in that position. You're out there, you're trying to draw your circle, you've made your one mark, you step back from it, and you're like, that looks like a lump of dropped Play-Doh. That doesn't look like a circle. The temptation is to erase the whole thing and try again. Don't do that. Look at that and figure out what it needs in order to become a circle. Let me get where I can see it better. So for me, I feel like I could use a line here. And it's a little hard for me to see because I'm having to stand off over to the side of this. But maybe here as well. All right, and then I can just erase out these lines I don't need. And then I have a circle in place. Right? That's the approach I want you to do with these. I want you to, what I sometimes find helps students is that they're like, all right, I think that circle should be about this tall. All right, and they'll make a little quick mark at the bottom and the top, and then try to fit their circle within that. And then make their corrections where they find that they've made mistakes. And then erase out what you don't need. Right? As opposed to making a circle by doing this kind of thing. Right? And the first time you make one, you might have something that looks like this, right? Some crazy thing, right? That's okay. Just get the mark in there that fixes that. Erase out the portions you don't need. Circles can be difficult to make in one stroke. I'm standing over here to the side, so I'm screwing them up. Let me see how well I can do if I'm actually standing right in front of one. But I'll bet you I can't make a perfect one either. Pretty decent. So then I would come in here and I'd be like, you know what? I got that sticking out a little too far right there. And maybe this could use a little extra up there. And then I would erase out what I don't need. Right? Simple as that. Questions about it at all? Okay. So head out to your spots. Just like on Tuesday, you're in a standing position for your first drawing. So your horizon line should be fairly high, but not like way up at the top of the drawing. Maybe about a third of the way down. Given what the things that we talked about on Tuesday, try to figure out where your vanishing point might be. I'm going to go ahead and start talking about it up here so that we don't run out of time. All right, so first assignment of the semester. It's on Google Classroom. You can go there where you'll find the instructions. you'll find the grading scheme that I told you about, where it explains what number equates to what letter, because Google Classroom only allows me to put numbers in. So like a 50, if you have a 50, that's an A+, a 48 is an A, 37 is a C, so on down the line. All right? And there are also some examples from past students that you can look at. So it says to divide your 18 by 24 newsprint. I don't know why this says white bond. Forget this. I'm going to have to fix that. I'll fix that because you should be using newsprint. Into at least 8 horizontal bands that fill the page. Fill each band with vertical lines that explore different line weights and methods of drawing. Don't try to draw objects or things. Consider weight, speed, and positive and negative space relationships. Lines can touch, but not cross. So you need an 18 by 24 sheet of newsprint. Ignore this. I don't know how that ended up in there. Your 2B, 4B, and 6B drawing pencils, but if you still haven't been able to get those, use whatever you have as a drawing pencil. All right. You may need a yardstick, you might not, but you'll certainly need a ruler or something as a straight edge and an eraser. And so what we're talking about is you're going to take your sheet of paper, you're going to divide it up into at least 8 horizontal bands. There can be more if you want. And you can have your paper turned this way, or you can have your paper turned that way. Then, along each of these bands, you're going to take your ruler, lie it down flat, and make vertical lines. It may feel tedious. It may feel like there's no point. But I promise you there's a lesson to the madness. Right? And what I want you to experiment with then is different types of weight. So up there I have written, well, I'll talk about that when I get over there. But when I talk about weight, I'm talking about pressure, but also the pencil itself. A 2B, a 4B, and a 6B. Vary those up and see what different things you get. So the pressure, the speed, how fast do you make each mark, and then positive and negative shapes, right? So thinking about maybe I make a few that are all really close together, but then I give myself a big negative space. Then I'll put a few with a little bit of negative space in between, but not as little as that. Maybe I'll put a whole bunch of them really close together so there's almost no negative space in between, and then give myself a big space, right? I want you to vary those up and try different things. Experiment with all those different things. All right, so the first thing I want to point out to you are those grades and what they mean, right? Pencils have 2 grades, H and B. H makes sense. It stands for hard. B, for some reason, stands for soft. In whatever pencil you may have, in your case it's graphite, there is the graphite in the middle, and then there's like a waxy binder that holds that graphite powder together. H grade pencils have more of the binder than they do of the graphite powder. And as a result, they're nice and hard. You don't have to sharpen them as much, but they make very light lines. B, or soft grade pencils, have more of the graphite powder than they do of the binder. Makes them softer. It does make them dull quicker, but they make darker lines as a result. And so the higher that number in front of the B, the softer that pencil is, and the darker the mark you can get from it. So with the exact same amount of pressure with a 2B, and then moving to a 4B, using the exact same amount of pressure that you use with that 2B, the 4B is going to be darker. And the exact same amount of pressure with the 6B, it'll be darker. So, again, you're going to take your page, you're going to divide it into at least 8 horizontal bands, and then with a ruler, you put your ruler down and make a vertical mark. Then think about your negative space. Maybe I want to move out here, and maybe this time I'm going to press down harder and see what happens. Maybe I'll move out a little bit, and then I'll draw it very quickly and see what a different kind of line I get from that. Maybe I'll change up my type of pencil from that 2B to a 4B, which makes a really dark line without me even having to try. Maybe I'll move slowly with this one versus a fast one right next to it and see what I get. Then, should you want an area that's got like a thick area of dark lines, do so by making your lines all right next to one another, leaving no space in between, like so. Right, that's a series of lines that I put so close together there's no space in between them. Don't do this, because you might feel tempted to be like, ooh, I know what I'll do. I'm such a genius. Jason has never seen this before. No student has ever done it. I'm just going to put two lines like that, and then in between I'm going to do this. And I'm so smart. No other student in all of Jason's career has ever tried this. He is never going to notice. I will notice. So please don't do that. That will affect the grade. Right? I want you to embrace this. Working with vertical lines. We're not making any lines that are diagonal. We're not making loop-de-loops or curlicues. Right? All of those lines should be vertical. They can touch one another, or they can have space in between. They can't cross one another. Right? If all you have is just one kind of pencil, use that one kind of pencil and vary up your darkness through pressure. Because if I don't press very hard at all, I can get one kind of line. If I put more pressure down, I can get a different, darker line, and even more pressure, it can get even darker. Right? Do with whatever you have. If you have the 2B, 4B, and 6B, vary it up. Try them all as you work on this. All right? Questions at all? All right. As always, homework is always due the Tuesday that you come back. So these are due on Tuesday. You've got the weekend. Take care and enjoy your weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday.